road ended abruptly at the edge of a dense forest, where the trees gave way to a cluster of buildings that had been abandoned for decades. The village was small, almost forgotten by maps and memory, yet something about it called me forward. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and rotting wood. A chill brushed my skin despite the sun still hanging high in the sky. I stepped onto the cracked cobblestone streets. The houses were weathered, roofs sagging, windows shattered or boarded up. Doors hung crookedly on their hinges. It was silent, eerily so, but that silence carried weight, like the hushed breath of something waiting, watching. My footsteps echoed too loudly, bouncing off the walls of the abandoned homes. Then I noticed it, the shadows. Not the ones cast by my own body, but shadows that didn't belong to anything. They stretched unnaturally long, twisting across the cobblestones, slipping along walls in ways that defied the angle of the sun. A crow cawed in the distance, its sound strangely muted, echoing as if the village itself was swallowing noise. I reached the town square, where a broken fountain sat dry and cracked. The shadows pooled near the fountain, thick and dark, as if the ground itself had absorbed them. They stirred as I approached, recoiling slightly, then shifting closer with silent intent. A gust of wind rattled the shutters of the abandoned houses. The shadows followed it, sliding along the walls, elongating, merging with one another. I noticed one in particular that seemed almost human, crouched near the steps of a house. It moved with deliberate grace, independent of any light source, eyes, or the lack thereof, fixated on me. I tried to shake off the unease and explored further. The streets were narrow, twisting unexpectedly, leading me past houses that seemed familiar yet unfamiliar at the same time. Doors opened and closed on their own, loose shutters banged against walls, and the faintest whispers brushed my ears, indistinct, fragmented, like the village was attempting to speak in half-formed sentences. Stay, leave, do not. A small church appeared at the edge of the square. Its steeple leaned precariously, and the bell inside was rusted still. Shadows lingered in the windows, stretching downward as if trying to escape. I approached, each step heavier than the last. The church doors creaked open slowly, inviting me in, or warning me away. Inside, pews were intact but coated with dust. The floorboards groaned underfoot, though I was the only one there. Shadows moved along the walls, mirroring shapes I didn't make, moving faster than I could follow with my eyes. In the corner, a shadow detached itself from the floor and stretched toward me, pausing a foot away from my hand. I froze. It didn't speak, didn't make a sound, yet I felt a pressure on my mind, as though it were aware, intelligent, studying me. I backed out of the church and into the square. The shadows had multiplied, creeping across streets and sidewalks, pooling in alleyways and empty homes. They seemed drawn to me, but not aggressively, more like attention, curiosity, an invitation, or a warning. One house in particular caught my eye. Its front door swung slightly, revealing darkness beyond. I approached cautiously. Inside, furniture was upended, and the floorboards were splintered. Shadows here were more pronounced, sliding along walls, pooling near corners, rising slightly as if testing gravity. A faint rustle came from the attic stairs. I shone my flashlight upward. Something moved, a shadow that didn't conform to the shape of stairs, rising like smoke, then retreating into the ceiling. The village seemed alive in its absence of life. Every shadow, every whisper, every creak of wood carried purpose. The air felt heavy, as if each breath I took had weight, as if the village itself measured my presence. I realized the shadows weren't just strange, they were sentient, aware, and patient. I wandered further down the streets. Broken fences lined the roads, their shadows twisting in ways that made my skin crawl. Windows stared at me like empty eyes, and behind them, I glimpsed movements, shapes barely perceptible, shifting in the corner of my vision. Each time I turned to look directly, nothing was there. The village was playing with perception, bending reality subtly around me. As the sun dipped lower, the shadows grew longer, merging into a thick, moving darkness that blanketed the streets. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, almost coherent. Do not leave. You belong. Follow. My pulse quickened. I had no clear path out. Every street seemed to twist, returning me to the town square despite my attempts to find an exit. Then I saw a figure. Not a shadow, but a person, or what looked like one. Standing at the edge of the square, partially obscured by darkness. Its face was featureless, but its presence was undeniable. The shadows around it shifted, leaning toward it like a tide. My instinct screamed to run, but my feet felt heavy, glued to the cobblestones. The village had noticed me, and now it waited. I stepped back cautiously, turning away, but the streets had changed. The village wasn't just abandoned, it was alive, aware, and I was part of its rhythm now. Shadows moved ahead of me, guiding me, warning me, or perhaps luring me deeper into the forgotten place. I paused at the fountain again. Shadows pooled thickly around its edges, forming patterns I couldn't understand. The whispers became urgent, insistent. Do not leave. Stay. Remain. See. The village's intent was clear. Those who enter rarely leave unchanged, and some never leave at all. And that's when I realized the truth. The village wasn't haunted in the traditional sense. It didn't need ghosts. It was the shadows themselves that held the memory, the consciousness, the power. They observed, followed, and waited. Time in this village was different, twisted, warped. Every step I took brought me closer to understanding, or to becoming another shadow, trapped forever in the streets of the forgotten village. The sun dipped lower, casting long, distorted shadows that merged and stretched across the village streets. Every step I took echoed oddly, not just on the cobblestones, but inside the walls of abandoned homes. The shadows were no longer passive. They slithered across surfaces, stretching toward me, sometimes detaching entirely from the ground to float a few inches above the floor. I reached what looked like the old town hall. Its doors hung crookedly, paint peeling, windows shattered. As I stepped closer, the shadows inside shifted violently, twisting like smoke in a gale. From the broken windows, faint whispers drifted. Do not leave, do not leave, stay with us. They overlapped, rising in pitch and volume, impossible to ignore. Inside, dust-covered benches and crumbling papers littered the floor. A shadow slid along the wall toward me, elongating unnaturally. It hovered beside a collapsed podium and paused, as if studying me. I raised my flashlight. It recoiled slightly, then advanced again, gliding over the cracked floorboards without making a sound. Suddenly, the air grew colder. Every breath came out as visible fog. Shadows along the walls stretched and condensed simultaneously, forming humanoid shapes that mirrored movements I hadn't made. One moved toward me deliberately, extending a tendril-like arm of darkness. I backed up, heart racing, and it dissipated only to reappear near a doorway. I darted down a narrow street. Shadows followed, shifting faster than I could track. They clustered around corners, stretching across broken fences, pooling in empty doorways. I could almost hear them whispering in unison, "We see, we follow, we remember." At the edge of the village, a small graveyard emerged, headstones leaning at odd angles. Shadows pooled around each stone, forming faint humanoid outlines. Some rose, reaching upward like pleading hands, then collapsed back into the darkness. One headstone glowed faintly with an inscription I couldn't read, the shadow near it bending and twisting toward me. I stepped carefully between graves. The shadows merged, forming a thick, undulating mass that seemed to anticipate my every move. The whispers intensified, layered and overlapping, almost chanting, "Stay, remain, never leave." A house at the end of the street caught my attention. Its door swung open slowly. Inside, furniture was upended, cobwebs stretched between broken chairs, and a fireplace held cold ashes. Shadows inside moved deliberately, forming figures that appeared to be waiting for me. Some leaned over tables as though reading invisible documents. Others stood silently near the walls, observing. One shadow approached slowly, shape-shifting between human and something entirely alien. Its presence pressed on my mind, subtle but insistent. "See, understand, become part." I stumbled back, tripping over broken floorboards. A pile of shadows surged toward me, then recoiled as if testing my resolve. I ran out of the house into the main street. Shadows clustered densely, stretching from building to building, forming dark bridges and arches overhead. The village itself seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting subtly, shifting streets and alleys. Every attempt to leave seemed futile, the paths twisted back on themselves, returning me to the town square. The square was unnervingly still. Shadows moved along the edges, stretching and merging, forming figures of past villagers. I thought I recognized faces, blurred, hollow-eyed, trapped forever in shadowy form. The whispers rose to a fevered pitch, "Do not leave, you belong, join us." I saw a narrow alleyway that appeared to lead toward a cluster of houses at the village's edge. Shadows shifted to block the path, but a faint light glimmered beyond. My instincts told me it was a possible exit. I ran toward it, pushing through the oppressive darkness. Shadows swirled around me, brushing my arms, reaching for my legs, then dissipating at the edge of the light. The alley opened to a small courtyard. Here, the shadows were thickest, moving almost like water, forming waves that pulsed with an eerie rhythm. One shadow detached entirely, rising like smoke and stretching toward me. It hovered in front of my face, pulsing slightly, whispering words I could feel in my mind rather than hear. "Stay, become part, time is ours." I stumbled backward, tripping over uneven stones. A group of shadows surged, twisting around me, forming humanoid figures, reaching toward me. Panic surged. I had to find the edge, the border, the place where the village's influence ended. Through the corner of my eye, I saw a small chapel at the far edge. Its doors were cracked, light spilling faintly from within. Shadows clustered at the entrance, hesitating as if respecting some boundary. I sprinted toward it, heart hammering, arms outstretched. The whispers followed, fading slightly but still present. "Do not leave, you will return." I reached the chapel and pushed through the doors. Inside, it was empty save for broken pews and a dusty altar. Shadows were at the windows, stretching toward me, but none entered. I pressed myself against the far wall, gasping for breath. For a moment, silence. The shadows outside remained, observing but not advancing. The village seemed to settle, waiting. I realized then that the shadows were patient, sentient, and eternal. They did not need to attack, they simply observed, following, shaping the village and all who entered. They remembered every visitor, every movement, every fear. I knew leaving would not be simple. The village was alive in its absence of life, a place where time bent, streets twisted, and shadows never left. But I had to try. I stepped toward the chapel doors again, determined to escape the village's pull. I pushed through the chapel doors and stepped outside into the waning light of evening. The village lay before me like a trap frozen in time. Shadows stretched unnaturally long across the cobblestones, pooling around abandoned houses and crooked fences. The air was thick, almost viscous, pressing against me as if trying to pull me back. From the town square, I could see them, hundreds of shadows, moving as one, stretching and twisting, yet each with a subtle individuality. Some crouched along the rooftops, others merged into the walls, and a few hovered like specters in the streets. I realized then that these weren't mere absence of light, they were the souls of the forgotten villagers, trapped, watching, waiting. A shadow detached itself and floated toward me, humanoid in shape but with no face, only a void where features should be. It stretched its tendrils of darkness toward me, pulsing slowly, almost beckoning. The whispers returned, layered and insistent. Stay, remain, become part of us, time is ours. I took a step back. My mind spun with panic. The village had drawn me in, tested me, observed me, and now it demanded a choice. Step forward, and I would join the eternal inhabitants of this forgotten place. Step back, and escape would be uncertain. Shadows would follow, waiting for another lapse, another moment of hesitation. I ran down the cobblestones, shadows gliding alongside me, stretching and reaching, never touching but always present. They responded to my movements, shifting and stretching, forming obstacles and guides simultaneously. The village itself seemed alive, streets twisting and bending, buildings rearranging subtly to trap me further. A distant light appeared, a faint glimmer through a broken gate at the village's edge. I sprinted toward it, ignoring the whispers that tried to cloud my mind. The shadows surged behind me, pressing, stretching, whispering threats and warnings. Yet, as I neared the gate, they hesitated, forming a boundary just short of letting me pass. With a final push, I burst through the gate. The moment I stepped onto the road beyond the village, the shadows recoiled, retreating into the darkness of the streets. The whispers faded, leaving only a faint hum in my ears. I turned back. The village appeared as it had at first glance, abandoned, silent, seemingly ordinary. But I knew better. I could feel its awareness, even from outside the gates. The shadows lingered in my mind, a reminder that the village never truly let anyone go. Time within its borders bent, twisted, and trapped all who entered, and the shadows remembered every visitor, every action, every fear. I walked quickly down the road, glancing over my shoulder. No movement. No shadows. Yet, the feeling of being watched remained, faint but unrelenting. The village had left its mark on me. I could still feel the pull, subtle and insistent, tugging at my thoughts, reminding me that I had entered a place where shadows never leave. At home, days later, I realized the extent of the village's reach. Shadows in corners of rooms seemed darker, moving slightly when I wasn't looking. Footsteps echoed faintly when I was alone. Sometimes, in my dreams, I returned to the village, wandering the streets, hearing whispers, and seeing shadows stretch across buildings in impossible ways. The realization hit me, once the village touches you, a part of it never leaves. It becomes a shadow in your life, following silently, waiting, watching, ensuring that its story continues through you. I could not erase it, could not ignore it, could not forget. So, if you ever hear of a forgotten village hidden in the woods, with cobblestone streets and decaying houses, heed this warning: do not enter. Listen for the faint whispers, the shadows moving without bodies, the unnatural stillness of time. The village is patient. Shadows never leave. And neither will the memory of those who dared to walk its streets. If this story gave you chills, like, share, and subscribe for more abandoned villages, haunted places, and eerie tales where shadows remember everything, and sometimes, so do you.